under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next up is roll call.
Commissioner Bradley.
Here.
Commissioner Gutierrez.
Here.
Commissioner Harper-Pedersen. Chair Bergman is absent this evening, and so Vice Chair David Silberman.
Present. Next up is public comment. This item is intended to cover items that are not on the agenda. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak on a matter that is not on the agenda today? Okay. Seeing none, moving on to item 5, approval of the minutes. Does anyone have any changes to the minutes?
I do not.
I didn't have any changes to the minutes.
No. So I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Is there a second? I'm going to acknowledge Angela as the second. Can I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Bradley.
Yes.
Commissioner Gutierrez.
Yes.
Commissioner Harper-Pedersen.
Yes.
Vice Chair Silberman.
Yes. Moving on to public hearing. The procedure for a public hearing is as follows. Staff will present a report on the history, physical features, et cetera, on the application, followed with the staff's recommendations. The applicant will or may make a presentation. Thereafter, interested members of the community may speak on the proposal. When all interested parties have had an opportunity to be heard, the hearing will be closed, and no further discussion from the floor can be held. The commission will then consider the evidence and make its recommendation. If you challenge a public hearing item in court, you may be limited to raising only those issues you or someone else raised at the public hearing described in this notice, the public notice, or in written correspondence delivered to the city at or prior to the public hearing. Speakers are asked to fill out a speaker's form found by the door and hand it to the recording secretary prior to addressing the commission. Speakers should come up to the microphone to speak since the meeting is being recorded. This will assist staff in preparing the minutes. So I am assuming most folks are here for lot splits. We do have 2 items not related to lot splits, one of which will take about 30 seconds, and the other we'll see, but hopefully shouldn't take too long. But we're going to go ahead and do those first, beginning with 1119 Industrial Road, consideration of conditional use permit for a large-scale entertainment and recreation use for Laser Quest. This was an item continued from July 2016, and does staff have a presentation?
We do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Laura Russell, and I'll be presenting the project to you tonight on behalf of Jill Lewis. So as you know, the project was continued from the July 5th meeting, and at that time, the proposed business was described, and there was quite a bit of conversation about it, and there were not any concerns raised at that time about the land use itself. However, there were questions and concerns raised about the parking required for that particular use, as well as the available parking at the shopping center. Therefore, this presentation this evening is going to focus on those questions and comments that were raised, specifically related to parking. So here's the map showing the major tenants with the property line shown in yellow. I know you're familiar with the site, but what we added were kind of the logos and indications of the different major uses. The Laser Quest use is shown in red. They proposed to sublease the space from the Ross store. It had previously been used as storage. The entrance to the proposed Laser Quest is on the south side, which is the right side of this slide, which is located across from Satellite Healthcare, which is on a separate property. The municipal code sets parking requirements for some commercial recreation uses and designates the community development director as the authority to set parking for uses that are not specifically listed. So this table is going to be familiar to the Planning Commission, but it is updated after the last conversation, and we've highlighted for you here a couple of the key numbers. So based on that discretion within the code that rests with the Community Development Director, staff has applied a ratio of 1 parking space per 385 square feet. That's the same number which was used in Mountain View and is similar to other Laser Quest locations. So that results in a parking requirement of 35 spaces. So this table is also on page 2 of the staff report. The key numbers here are circled. So you're going to see the first red circle is the existing Ross parking requirement, 101 spaces. Then you can see when the storage area is taken away, the Ross parking is reduced down to 94 spaces. Then underneath that, the Laser Quest use has the parking requirement of 35 spaces that I just mentioned. So the total requirement for existing uses is 299, and the total required with Laser Quest is 327. Then we take these numbers and look back to the municipal code. So when a change in use happens, then we look at the difference, the percent increase. So in this case, in general, if it increases by 10% or more, then parking is required for that net increase. When the increase in parking is less than 10%, then no new parking is required. So if we take those requirements here, we get 327 spaces required with Laser Quest, 299 required with the existing conditions. So the difference is 28 spaces. Divide that by the existing conditions, and we get a 9% increase. So no new parking is required per the municipal code. Excuse me. So there was also discussion at the July 5th meeting about the capacity of the parking lot. So the city hired Hexagon Transportation Consultants, an outside traffic and transportation firm, to conduct counts of the parking lot at peak times. They went out on 2 Fridays, August 5th and 12th, and the consecutive Saturdays, August 6th and 13th. The report is included as attachment 2 to the staff report. They found that at peak times, there was still a significant number of spaces available. At the busiest time, which is Saturday afternoon, there were 96 spaces available. The Planning Commission also asked the applicant to return with a parking management plan to help address the concerns that were raised at the meeting. Their strategies are included in the staff report and incorporated into the conditions of approval and the draft certificate that's included in your packet. As a quick summary, they include exterior building signage, a customer notification at the time that they book their event. The majority of their events are booked online. Interior signage near the front with a site plan showing people where they're supposed to park, as well as adjacent tenant outreach. They've indicated they are willing to continue to cooperate with neighbors and encourage neighbors to take on the same types of measures. So staff sent the required legal notice, and we have not received any additional public comments beyond what was shared with the Planning Commission for the July 5th meeting. So if the Planning Commission wishes to approve the project this evening, this is the motion that you would make. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions that you may have, and the applicant is here as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the applicant intend to make a presentation of any kind?
He could speak to his own strategies, since I've just outlined them here, but you have them in your staff report. So I think he would like to keep it short.
Okay, so either you can speak to this or he can speak to this. I mean, one of the things that I wanted to see was them actually communicate with the neighboring tenants and work something out. So I see that there's a plan, but is this a function and a response to their communications with the other tenants, or was it just something they came up with on their own?
I would have to defer to the applicant.
Okay. And last time we heard from King's Swim Academy and from Satellite Healthcare, we've heard nothing from them?
Staff has heard nothing additional since the meeting.
Okay.
So nothing directly to us.
Okay. All right. Well, does anyone have any questions for staff?
My only question is that, obviously the traffic study and the parking plan seem to be more sufficient counting spaces wise, but if I remember from our previous conversation, the bigger challenge was going to be spillover specifically to satellite healthcare who may have lower mobility patients and preventing them from specifically parking in front of their building. And I'm wondering if that does continue to be a problem despite the plan, would that be able to be addressed at staff level and maybe add a new condition, or would it have to come back to the commission?
I think the way that the conditions are drafted, we could have things returned at a staff level. So let me take a look at that perhaps while the applicant comes up to answer that question.
Thank you.
It's drafted in the,
Yeah, it's in here.
it's in there.
I wasn't sure I read
Yeah.
it right.
It's 4. It's condition 4 of attachment 1. So did you want to come up, sir?
Good evening, Commissioners. Just to clarify one point that was made earlier, the majority of the bookings are not made online. They're usually people call in. That's when we're going to say to the customer that we've got this situation with the parking, that we don't want them to park near the entrance of the facility, that we'd like them to park at the front of the building and come over. So that'll be the first time they'll be told that. There'll be a sign, prominent sign in the entrance to make sure that nobody parks where they're not supposed to. There'll be a plan there, which you have in your packet. And if you go to that plan, the reason we've designated this area, I don't know if you see it, but this area here was in the study that we conducted, which was matched pretty closely to the Hexagon study. What was shown in our study was that majority of the time there was nobody parking in that area that's outlined in blue. So we're going to encourage all of our customers to park in that area and then walk over. When they come, there's one other thing that has come up since we've talked about this and since the letters were sent to you, and that is when they come to the counter, we're going to ask them where they parked, and just to make sure that they for sure didn't park in the no parking area and that they parked at the front of the building. If they parked anywhere they weren't supposed to, we're going to ask them to move their car, and basically tell them if they don't, it'll be towed. So we're going to encourage them as much as we possibly can not to park near the entrance of the building.
And are you willing to add that as a condition?
I'm willing to add that as a condition.
Okay.
In terms of the additional plans, we're always happy to work with staff. So if there is a problem and it's caused by our customers, we're willing to do other things. Funny, today I was at a facility and I saw that they had plastic cones out with rope in it to sort of block off an area, so it wasn't bad for fire and so on. So if it got to the point where the dialysis people were complaining that customers were going there, we could rig up a system and work with the planning department to get that done as well, if that needed to be done. And if it's still a problem, then we'll come up with other solutions. There are other ways to handle this. Obviously, some of them are going to be more expensive that we'd like to avoid it because we don't believe there will be a problem. But if there is, we're happy to work with staff and not come back to you and talk to you here. Although we'll come back if we have to. No
You don't
offense.
want to talk to us.
No
is what you're
offense.
saying.
Minimal taken.
And that was exactly what I was getting to, is if there is a way they could talk to staff before coming to us.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to be working hand in hand with them at the beginning for the signage and all of the notices and all the things that we're going to be doing. So we're happy to continue to do that.
Terrific.
So when they book, do they get an email confirmation of that, or?
I'm not sure of that.
Okay.
I'm not sure. But we could remind them of that as well.
That's why I was asking.
We're going to make sure that all our customers are very aware that we'd prefer that they all park at the front of the building.
Okay, great.
And was your plan worked out in conjunction with the other tenants?
It was worked out in conjunction with the landlord. We weren't able to contact the other tenants.
What do you mean?
We were. I asked the landlord a number of times to speak to Swim Academy, but I don't know if he did or not, and he's not here tonight. Kings is here.
I'm sorry, I don't know who James is.
Kings.
Academy.
Oh, King's Academy's here.
Yeah,
Okay,
lieutenant.
fantastic. Okay, any other questions for the applicant?
Great, thank you.
Okay. You're going to tell us it's in number 4?
Well,
And
The
also,
commission is in number 4.
Yeah,
The
I was actually going to
staff
point you
was not.
to number 9.
yeah, number 9 also has a lot of wording on that.
So we're requiring a customer parking outreach plan to the satisfaction of the community development director, which outlines a number of things. And then if the community development director thought it was warranted, could refer it back up to the planning commission according to number 4. But based on what we just heard, what I would recommend is that we amend that condition to add that when their customers arrive at the counter, they actually ask them where they've parked. So that would be another form of outreach. So I would add that to condition number 9.
Okay. Thank you. Does anyone wish to be heard on this item? Come on up.
I'm Jeff Smith from Kingston Academy, and I've been waiting since that last meeting to be contacted. I did see them after and said, I'd be glad to talk to you guys and help, and got some ideas. Never contacted, and so a week ago when I was told that there's a meeting for this, I was a little surprised because we do have concerns, as I told you before. Kingston Academy, we're booming, and like I said, and we have a lot of children. Most of our clientele is 6 and under, with a lot of babies, and that's moms with strollers, the whole deal. And we use the facilities similar times to when they do. We don't go as late. We don't go on Sundays. And then with the changes that have happened in that very center spot, because you have the big building, which is the DeVillas building, and then you have Satellite, which now they've just got, since they decided they were going to start coming, they've got Satellite. Getz Brothers came in, which is all great, and fly fishing came in. So all of those are brand new to the place, which has changed our parking. And we've been working with them going, okay, and they've got signs up, they've towed people, the moms, they've towed them, they have no mercy. And so we've done everything we can to move, and we are packed out. And Satellite didn't open till the 16th. Which, they took the study before that in August. They didn't open their doors, I think, until the 16th. So I do have, again, I love the idea of them parking in front of West Marine. That is where everybody would walk from. I would put my employees and say, hey, you guys got to all park there. And, the moms know with the babies, I wouldn't do that. But I also know human nature, and we'll park as close as we can. And we'll just keep kind of going around until somebody leaves. And I worry about that. I do worry about the parking over there. We've got signs out, little guys saying slow, slow, just because of the babies and the moms. I'm not for this, even though I love Laser Quest. I got 4 kids. I just think there might be a better spot down the road, maybe Pays or whatever that guy's name. That one building that's empty, there might be some better spots for it than right here in the back of Ross, which was Ross's original. It wasn't designed to be a space on its own. It was designed to be part of Ross. Ross didn't use the space, so therefore they're busting it out and making an entrance for another store, which happens to be right next to us, between us and the furniture place. So I am concerned. Sorry I didn't bring anything to you. I didn't know I was supposed to with that.
Bring what?
One of you asked, did we bring anything? No, you didn't?
Oh,
okay.
Bring up your concerns.
Oh, okay. So I'm bringing my concerns
Yes.
now. So anyway, I think that's about 2 minutes.
Did you receive notice of this meeting from the city?
My CEO, I don't know, he probably got it from you guys, and then he let me know.
Okay.
But as in for the meeting, I did meet these guys, DeVillas and Laser Quest, right out the door after our last meeting. And they said, hey, we can get together. I said, I'm willing to, and I've got some ideas. And I didn't hear a word from any of them. So,
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Does anyone else want to be heard on this particular item? Okay.
Can we close the public hearing?
And there's no, sir, did you want to come back up? And please do. And if you have, and again, I don't want to, I thought I was pretty clear that I wanted you folks to work this out with the other tenants. I mean, I don't know that I could have been any clearer about that.
When we spoke to Jill, she just told us to come up with a plan. She didn't advise us to see another tenant. I mean,
Well, I did.
Well, maybe you did, but I don't remember that.
Okay.
The study before Satellite, I mean, the Satellite, unless Satellite's customers are parking on at 1119 Industrial, they wouldn't affect the parking in any way, shape, or form. The study was done just on that parcel of land. So unless those customers are flowing over, that shouldn't change it. And better spot down the road. Here's the problem. We've been looking for 2 years to relocate our Mountain View store. It's almost impossible for us to find space. We've got a height requirement that knocks out about 75% of the building. So there's not a lot of spaces we can go to. So it's not like we can just move down the road to do this. But look, when you look at a downtown and a restaurant with no parking, they valet. That's how they get around it. If we have to, if it gets that bad that it's our customers causing it, then we're prepared to do that. But I'm not prepared to have that now as a requirement because we don't even know if that's going to be a problem. The second thing is that he's not open Sunday. We're only busy on Sunday afternoons and Saturday afternoons and late Friday nights. So we're not in conflict with him except for one day. And we're willing to do whatever it takes for that one day to make it work.
Okay. Thank you, sir. So I'd entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So
Is there a second? Okay. Motion and a second. Can I have a roll call?
Commissioner Bradley?
Yes.
Commissioner Gutierrez?
yes.
Commissioner Harper-Pedersen?
Yes.
Vice Chair Silberman?
Yes. Discussion among the commission.
I mean, the only thing I was honestly hoping for after our last conversation was that there'd be some conversation between the tenants about the employees parking further. And that's the one thing I really don't see, because I think it's pretty obvious from the traffic study that there are enough spots. It's just a matter of human nature wanting to park closer, as James had said, to the actual fronts of both of the business buildings. And so that I would have liked to have seen, and it's not a make or break if maybe that's something that can be put in later should there be a problem. But that's really what I was hoping to see after our last conversation. But otherwise, I mean, I don't think you can argue the numbers. There are the amount of spots for the buildings, period.
I was just hoping that the landlords would get more involved. I know we had that discussion. They were here, and we asked them to be a little more active. And a landlord not reaching out to all the tenants kind of seems to be a problem for me. But the conditions, the draft conditions, and elaborating on some of those, I think will take care of any issues that we have.
I voice the same. I agree. Item number 4 on page 3 there is just vague, but it did say that they were to get together with other tenants and take similar steps. This is a conditional use permit, so we can attach conditions, of course.
So I have a question for staff. You used based on your report, you used a ratio of 1 space per 385 square feet. But when you look at the applicant's letter, the applicant on page somewhere in here, am I looking at the hexagon report? No. Somewhere in here they indicate that the normal, here it is, on page 2 they write, however, based on actual experience, the parking demand at peak capacity is 1 parking space for every 366 square feet. And if you use that calculation, you end up with 2 additional spaces, and so you have a 30 space difference with 299 spaces, which is just over 10%, which would require additional parking. And I'm wondering why staff used the 1 in 385 rather than the 1 in 366 that the applicant themselves indicated was peak parking.
I think I can answer that as just a rule of thumb number that planners use.
But for this particular use, there is no. That's the whole point.
I'm going to give you at least a partial answer. And that is the 1,385 is from the materials from the last meeting, which is the same number that staff was using at that time. So we changed the way that we were representing it in the staff report to make it directly comparable, 1 space per 385. But the ratio has been the same all along. It was 2 spaces per, you know what I mean, in the thousands. So I just converted the numbers that we used previously. So the staff's determination of the 385 has been the same between both meetings based on the numbers that the applicant gave us of the Mountain View location. They submitted this afterwards, which does have different numbers. So I think the applicant, do you know what I mean, changed the way that they did their math, but we didn't change the way we did our math. We just converted it.
I'm following you.
Okay, thank you. That's responsive. I appreciate that. Well, I mean, it does seem like there's 3 votes to approve. I mean, I'm going to oppose, but you know, I completely understand where the rest of you are coming from. I think that had they spoken with the other landlords, as we asked them to do, excuse me, the other tenants and/or landlords, either way, I would have felt differently. I'm especially concerned because Satellite came to 2 separate meetings to discuss their concerns about this proposal, and they aren't here today, and I don't really have a reason why. It may be that they're happy with this plan. It may be that they don't know about the meeting. I don't know. But for that, and because of this discrepancy, I'm going to vote no. But you know, I'd absolutely entertain a motion for yes.
I'll move that the Planning Commission for the City of San Carlos approve the request of Leisure Entertainment for a conditional use permit to operate a large-scale commercial entertainment and recreation use at 1119 Industrial Road. That's APN 046-152-210, based on the findings and for the reasons incorporated in the staff report and as conditioned in the conditional use permit.
And we're going to add...
Yeah, I was going to say, are we modifying condition number 9, adding on to condition number 9? Actually, I'd like to add to, on the condition that they advise their employees to park in the area that they have designated as an additional condition, or add it on to condition number 9.
And then we were also adding a condition that when customers come in, they will be asked where they're going, where they have parked, and if they haven't parked in a designated area, they'll be asked to move.
Yes.
Did you accept that amendment as well?
Certainly.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Can I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Bradley?
Yes.
Commissioner Gutierrez?
Yes.
Commissioner Harper-Pedersen?
Yes.
Vice Chair Silverman?
No. Motion passes 3-1. All right, moving on to item B, 595 Industrial Road. Do we need to open a public hearing to continue the matter?
We don't need to open it. It's going to be renoticed.
It has a date certain in the agenda, which suggests to me that it wasn't going to be renoticed.
To clarify that through the chair, because it's been continued so many times, we are definitely going to be sending out a courtesy notice.
So should I have it continued to a date certain or a date uncertain?
I think because the agenda says the date certain, that I would recommend you do to the date certain, and then we will notice to that new date.
Okay. I would entertain a motion for item B.
I move that we move item B to a date certain, November 7th, 2016. Do I need to read the whole thing?
No.
Got it.
Is there a second?
Second.
Can I have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Bradley?
Yes.
Commissioner Gutierrez?
Yes.
Commissioner Harper-Pedersen?
Yes.
Vice Chair Silverman?
Yes. Okay, moving on to item 7A, study session on single-family lot splits. I believe we probably have a presentation.
Yes, we do. Good evening, Planning Commissioners, members of in the audience, and as well as to all of those who may be watching from home. My name is Lisa Porras. I'm a principal planner here with the City of San Carlos's Planning Division, and joining me tonight as part of this presentation is Senior Planner Laura Russell, who also contributed to the research contained in the staff report and as will be presented tonight, as well as Community Development Director Al Savay and City Attorney Greg Rubens. So I'd like to just first start off by providing a little bit of background. I suspect that some folks in this room are familiar with the background, but just to kind of explain how we got here and where we are headed with this particular topic. So we are here tonight at the request of the City Council, who asked the City's Planning Division to work with the Planning Commission and members of the public to discuss the matter of single-family lot splits and flag lot configurations in the city's residential neighborhoods. And specifically by residential neighborhoods, for the purposes of tonight's discussion, we're talking about the RS6 single-family zoning district. Concerns about the lot splits rose to the City's Council's attention just before summer of this year. In addition, there were also concerns raised about flag lots, which are essentially different shaped lots that are differently shaped, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later, that are proposed within existing neighborhoods and whether that should be allowed. So both the City Council and the Planning Commission had received multiple emails from several residents expressing their concerns that some properties were being split from one lot into two and the building of a new house on the resulting new lot. So to get in front of the issues, as some of you may recall, on June 6th, the Planning Commission had heard from staff about the existing regulations governing subdivisions within the city, information about how many lots had been split in recent years, and perhaps also some comparison to other cities' regulations concerning lot splits. A copy of the June 6th staff report has been included with tonight's information for your reference. So to address the concern and to allow for additional time for staff to work with the community, the City Council on June 27th adopted an urgency or interim ordinance that essentially prevents lots from splitting into minimum sizes of 5,000 square feet. This interim or urgency ordinance expires in May next year. So the City Council is asking the Planning Commission to bring forward a recommendation as to whether the regulation should be modified, and if so, then how. So to accomplish this, the first step is to have a dialogue with the community and the Planning Commission, which is the reason we're here tonight. So the Planning Division's role is to provide information about our existing regulations that govern lot splits, and also to present information about parcel data. The role of the public in this process is to provide public comment, whether that's by attending these meetings or by sending emails or other forms of written correspondence to the Planning Commission's attention. The Planning Commission will then review and consider all information, data, and public comment, and then make a recommendation to the City Council. So to get things started, I would like to take a minute to clarify what areas in the city we're actually addressing. Where are we really focusing our attention upon within this discussion? So up on this slide is a city zoning map, which is also provided as attachment 1 in tonight's packet. As you can see, most of the city's land area consists of the RS6 zoning district. And basically the RS6 zoning districts are all the areas kind of shown in yellow. Now I know it's a little bit hard to read because this map here is actually showing all the parcels, so it kind of looks gray in certain areas. But essentially all of this here is RS6 single-family zoning district. There are some pockets of lower density RS3, such as over in this area of the city, but by and large, you can see that the majority of the city's neighborhoods are comprised by the RS6 zoning designation. So when we talk about the rules tonight, it's really the rules as they relate to the RS6 zoning district. So for the purposes of tonight's discussion, and as mentioned in the staff report, we suggest two primary questions for your consideration. The first question is, should property owners of larger lots, lots that meet the current size requirements of the city subdivision regulations, be permitted to subdivide their property? And secondly, should property owners be allowed to subdivide their property into what we refer to as flag-shaped parcels? To facilitate the discussion for tonight, we essentially have 7 goals, and I just wanted to provide everyone with an outline of what we will be covering in tonight's presentation. The first is to review existing subdivision regulations concerning parcel size. The second is to take a look at some maps and data relative to parcel size and subdivision potential in the RS6 zoning district. And then third, based upon the maps, data, and regulations, we also want to take a look at what it would mean if the city changed its rules about minimum lot size. And then we want to take questions from the commission, hear from the public, and at the end of the meeting, staff will be looking for further direction from the Planning Commission. So to get started, let's start with current subdivision requirements within the city of San Carlos. As I mentioned before, the Planning Commission staff report of June 6 provides a lot of good information about the regulations governing lot splits. So for those of you who haven't had a chance to look at the June 6 staff report, I would encourage you to read it. It's a good place to start, but I'm going to summarize it again here tonight. So this table shows the size requirements for all land divisions within the city of San Carlos. On the left-hand side of the table, you'll note that the first column shows the ranges of cross-slope percentages. And this is essentially step 1 in determining what size parcel, the minimum size parcel you're required to have for any parcel that's being considered for land division. And as you can see, depending upon the degree of the slope, minimum parcel sizes can range from 10,000 square feet to up to 2 acres. Special attention should be paid, however, to footnote number 1, which you can see here is shown in 3 particular instances. And what footnote number 1 does is it refers to all development standards within the RS6 zoning designation, which includes minimum lot size. So if you have a parcel that has a 20% degree slope, you're required to have a minimum lot size of 10,000 square feet. However, if your land has a site cross slope less than 20%, essentially what you do is refer to Title 18, which is the city's zoning ordinance. And within the zoning ordinance, it sets forth parameters for minimum lot size and lot width. As you can see here in this slide, the minimum lot size refers to a size of 5,000 square feet with a lot width of 40 feet. So I wanted to provide you some information about footnote number 1. So first of all, it was added to the subdivision ordinance in 2001. This is discussed in the staff report. Secondly, it's
2001 or 2011?
Excuse me, 2011. That was, I'm looking at it, but it came out the wrong way, so thanks for the clarification. It was added to the subdivision ordinance in 2011. It points to another chapter of the municipal code, Title 18, and it says that the minimum parcel size for land less than a cross slope of 20% can be a minimum of 5,000 square feet with a minimum lot width of 40. So this is the current rule that presently governs land division within the RS6 zoning district. Now that we understand how the current rules work, we wanted to take a look at some characteristics of the existing land under the RS6 zoning designation within the city. So tonight we will be showing 5 different maps. The first map is going to show all RS6 lots that are 5,000 square feet or less. The second will show lots that are 10,000 square feet or greater. The third will show the potential for subdivisions based upon those current regulations I just discussed. And then we'll also show the potential for subdivision under previous subdivision regulations. And what I mean by previous is essentially if you remove the footnote that was added in 2011, what would that mean? And then we also want to show you a map of flag lot distribution within the city. So staff obtained this data. The data and maps that you're going to see was obtained by staff working with GIS consultants who basically ran a number of different queries using the city's base map or parcel map. However, for flag lots, staff conducted its own research. So this first map here shows all parcels that are within the RS6 zoning district that are equal to or less than 5,000 square feet. As the legend on the map indicates, there are over 1,000 lots in the city that meet this criteria. This is about 13% of all RS6 lots. And this map here is also showing the geographic distribution of lots of this size, and we can see that most of them are occurring in the East San Carlos neighborhood, as well as within the area south of Britton and moving towards Eaton Avenue. And the reason we wanted to show you this particular size lot is because this is the standard minimum lot size. And the standard doesn't necessarily mean that every single lot in the city should be 5,000 square feet. It's just the minimum that's allowed through a subdivision process. The division of land and the resulting parcel size will depend upon the size of the original parcel, its slope, its shape, as well as its configuration and orientation to the street. And as we'll see later in the upcoming slides, a vast majority of parcels in the RS6 zoning district are going to be greater than 5,000 square feet, but are under 10,000 square feet. So here's a map showing lots that are 10,000 square feet or larger. And there are just over 1,000 RS6 lots of this size. This map doesn't necessarily mean that all of these lots can be subdivided. As you recall, we also look at cross slope and we look at lot width as well. So if we were to apply the regulations that we currently have concerning site minimum parcel size, site cross slope, as well as lot width, there would be a total of about 259 lots that could potentially be subdivided under this criteria. And as you can see, there's not any one particular concentration. There's somewhat of a concentration towards the where San Carlos Avenue kind of turns the corner in this particular location, but they're roughly occurring in different areas around the city as well.
So is that sort of, I guess it's a rhombus technically, but sort of rectangular area, is that Carmelita?
This is Carmelita right here. Exactly.
So I'm sorry, you said that's not a concentration when all but only a couple of those lots are highlighted?
I appreciate the comment, and we can see them. Thank you.
If we return the regulations to what they were prior to 2011, there would be a total of 14 lots that could be subdivided. So this map here shows the geographical distribution of where those lots are located within the city. And so to summarize all of this, lots equal to or less than 5,000 square feet, we see that and lots that are equal to or greater than 10,000 square feet do not make up the majority of lot sizes within the city. This table here is showing that there are a total of about 7,939 parcels zoned RS6, and of this amount, 13% are 5,000 square feet or less, and a little bit more, at 16%, are 10,000 square feet or more. And all remaining lots, which comprise 71% of all RS6 lots, are falling somewhere between 5,000 square feet and 10,000 square feet. Under the current rules, 3% of all RS6 lots could potentially be subdivided. And if we were to roll back the regulations to what they were prior to 2011, less than 1% of all land zoned RS6 could potentially be subdivided. We also see that existing flag lots make up just 1% of all RS6 lots. So just for some context, whoops, let me go back here. Sorry about that. Here we go. So for some context, there have been 6 lot splits within the RS6 zoning district since the regulations were modified 5 years ago in 2011. And this map here shows the geographic distribution of these lots. There really isn't any concentration for where these have occurred. And for reference, this information was also included in the June 6th staff report, so you might find it familiar. So we're asking the question, what does all of this mean? We now know the potential for additional subdivisions under the current rules, which is 259 new lots. We also know the implications if we revert back to the old rules, which would result in 14 new lots. And this, of course, assumes every property owner of these lots wants to subdivide their property. However, from a policy standpoint, the City of San Carlos housing element sets forth a number of new units needed by income category to the year 2023. These are minimum numbers, and the goal is to ensure that development regulations do not constrain the production of new units. The ability to subdivide could potentially affect the number of new units that could be built, but overall, this would be minor. Under the existing rules, there could be a potential to construct 259 new single-family homes, and under the old rules, 14. And we would assume that all of these new homes would, of course, be market rate units rather than designated as affordable units. So within the housing element itself, it identifies a need for 183 new market rate units to 2023. And there is no requirement by the state that these market rate units must be single family, must be condo or apartment type. There's not a requirement for what residential type. It's just there are income categories assigned to these numbers. At present, the Planning Division can tell you that there are 455 new units that have been approved or are currently under construction, and of this amount, 16 units will be single-family housing. The remaining and majority of these units will be apartments or condos located in higher density areas along El Camino Real and within and around the downtown core. So should the city decide to require a minimum lot size of 10,000 square feet, which was what the regulations were prior to 2011, there would be no constraints toward meeting the market rate housing need of a minimum of 183 units based on the 455 units that are approved or under construction. So moving on to flag lots. In addition to minimum lot size, residents have expressed concerns over the potential to subdivide land into what we refer to as flag-shaped lots. So on the right-hand side, you can see an illustration for what is a flag lot. It's also referred to sometimes as a panhandle lot, where a narrow portion of the lot meets the street, and the primary development is located further back. So the concern has been whether flag-shaped lots should be allowed and whether or not they fit into the overall character of the neighborhood relative to building placement patterns on a particular block. In doing a bit of research, we've identified a total of 41 flag lots in the city, which are indicated by the dots shown on this map here. More information and details about the size of flag lots is provided in the staff report. The city subdivision ordinance at present does not prohibit flag lots, but there is criteria that says that the shape of the lot needs to conform to the general pattern of the neighborhood. And so when a flag lot is proposed, it must carefully be considered, and effects to the neighborhood pattern of development must be weighed. As with all lot splits, the Planning Commission is the review authority that makes decisions on lot splits after receiving evaluation from staff for consideration. As discussed in the staff report, most of the flag lots are over 10,000 square feet, and a majority of them are located in the hillside areas or within cul-de-sacs. So what would the process be to make changes to the city's subdivision ordinance? Essentially, we would follow the steps shown here on this particular slide. We are starting first with study sessions where we can have a dialogue, address questions, receive comments, and review these maps and data. Then the Planning Commission would consider all of that information and make a recommendation to the City Council. Staff would take the Planning Commission's recommendation and present it to the City Council, and then the City Council would make a final decision at the second reading of the ordinance, and then 30 days later, new rules would go into effect. This concludes staff's presentation. The next steps for this evening are to receive questions from the Planning Commission, hear from the public, and at the close of the meeting, staff can receive direction from the Planning Commission, which can either be directing staff to schedule a public hearing for formal consideration of a Planning Commission recommendation, should the Commission be ready to make such recommendation, or to prepare for a follow-up study session, which we've tentatively scheduled for December 5th. Thank you, and I will return it back over to the chair.
Thank you. So unless there are any members of the Planning Commission that are itching to ask questions right now, I think I'd probably skip to public comment, if that's all right. Okay, so let me make some observations about public comment. First, please be respectful to everybody. We're all neighbors. Everybody here lives in San Carlos, and we all care about what happens to San Carlos. Two, there's going to be a temptation to clap when you hear something that you agree with. Please don't, and I'll tell you why. I've been in a number of meetings where the vast majority of folks had one particular view, or at least it seemed like, and then there was lots of clapping, and then at the end of the meeting or the next day, I heard from someone who said, you know what, I didn't agree, but I didn't feel comfortable getting up and saying something because I felt like everyone, felt differently, and, I was going to be a pariah. So, again, I can't stop you from clapping, but I'd ask you not to, because I don't think it's helpful. I'm going to set 2 minutes per speaker. Hopefully that'll be enough time. If it's not, you can ask for more. But keep in mind, I'd like to give everyone an opportunity to speak. If, as I suspect is possible, a lot of folks are here and your view is, I don't like lot splits, feel free to get up and just say, hey, I don't like lot splits for the various reasons that people already gave. You don't have to repeat them, but you absolutely can if you'd like to. You can also provide comments in writing. We read them. I've received 10 or so in the last 24 hours. I've read every single one of them. I think that is pretty much it. Anything?
No decision will be made today.
No decision will be made today. We will, at a minimum, come back for one more meeting to make a decision. But I think that, as you've already heard, that shouldn't be of a concern because there's a moratorium on lot splits that will last at least until May.
And we're essentially making recommendations.
And we will be making a recommendation to the City Council for its consideration. Anything else? Oh, and then lastly, for those of you who've been following this, there are two main issues that we've been thinking about and discussing for some time, one of which we're dealing with right now and the other one which we aren't. The one that we're dealing with right now is lot splits. The one that we're not dealing with right now is housing standards, or as some folks refer to it as massive houses on small lots. We're not addressing the size of houses on lots today. So if you can keep your comments to lot splits, that would be great. But if your view is, I don't mind lot splits as long as the houses on the lots aren't super big, then you can certainly say that. If you have a view of how big the lots should be, you can certainly say that. And I think that covers it. Yeah, is that pretty comprehensive?
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll also look at flag lots.
Yeah, oh, absolutely,
Yeah.
for sure. So I'm going to go through the cards. If you haven't provided one and you don't mind filling one out, that would be fantastic. It's helpful for us because it lets us record your name more accurately. But if I get through the end and you haven't filled out a card and you want to speak, you're more than welcome to. So I'm going to start with Christian, because I think there might end up being a lot of Me Too's, if that's okay. Do you mind starting, Christian?
Not at all. Actually, Brent Cow and I are going to get up together, and I sent a presentation in because we had some visuals to support. I have it on the thumb drive, and I'd be happy to provide it now if we could have that, because I think it would be...
So I can take a look at it.
You have it?
I don't have it.
Okay. Can we put it on a thumb? Can we put it up? You want to come on up?
Sure.
How much time do you need, Christian?
Probably more than 2 minutes.
5. Well, for the two of us, 5.
Okay. Done.
Okay. It's only 5 months.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't receive it. Maybe it was a file size or something.
Could have been. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. My name is Christian Vesha. This is Brent Cowan. We have been collaborating for months now with the input and support of, I'd say, a dozen other residents who've done meaningful work to contribute to analyses that we've done and input such as Sarah Timby provided around input on recommendations or positions we think are reasonable standards relative to the code. So we wanted to get up today for two reasons. You see it says Good Growth San Carlos. One is to represent ourselves and others who we've worked with around what we think are appropriate standards for the city of good living, as well as say that we have put together a bit of an organization so that residents' voice are clearly heard at in this discussion, and it's rigorous. So.
I'm sorry to have to interrupt you, Christian. I have a little bit of a limitation here. I only have one input for a thumb drive, so you're going to need to use this, and you can use the down arrow. Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
So just wanted to start briefly with a visual of, this is kind of part and parcel of why we're here. It has to do, I think, lot splits, and as you said, David, big house, what happens when you split a lot is a lot of times we're taking a modest-sized house and ending up with two very large houses. So I'm not sure I agree with the decision to separate these issues. This is, I think, the reason that individuals here, neighbors here, et cetera. I would just ask any of you here to imagine when this happens next door to you, there's a significant impact on your privacy, on your light, on the feel and character of your neighborhood, and as well as kind of the culture and the affordability of San Carlos. So I won't belabor that because I think the pictures represent effectively what we've got. These are all built in the last 5 years since the change to the zoning ordinance. So this is a current representation of the kinds of things that are changing. This is an analysis that certainly the Planning Commission seen before. My concern, Brent's concern, and many others is that the San Carlos zoning ordinance, as it was changed in 2011, allowed substantially larger houses than peer cities on the peninsula. And if you do look at this, it's really by a factor of 2x, and that has to do with not just things like lot area coverage, but also the reduction in the size of parcels that we allow to be split. So all of those contribute to the increasing density that we're seeing in San Carlos. So, as residents, we are trying to amplify the voice and make sure the input of people who are typically don't do this as their living, unlike architects and builders do. We want to be sure that we have a strong voice. And what we're really striving to do is promote sensible development to preserve San Carlos, the reasons we moved here. And so there are 7 areas that we've identified that we think the zoning ordinance needs to be modified. Number 2 on this list, as you'll see, is lot splits, and the others are other related elements. So let me stop there because Brent is closely connected with the lot splits issue and is going to speak to that.
Yeah, so thank you, Christian. So, I've previously made comments, meetings leading up to this regarding the lot split issue. I don't want to dwell back into the underlying factors and economics. And we're here now, the issue is being studied, and many of us are very thankful for that. So relatively speaking, when we look at the latest analysis from the planning department, I think it is very insightful that there's general agreement we're not going to solve our housing shortage with an inventory of the 259 lots here in San Carlos. There's been conversation about how big of an issue is this really with only a half a dozen instances over the last 5 years. But each of these instances, and many of the individuals who are in the room tonight, have been impacted and live on Carmelita or White Oak Way. Some of us are on Cedar Street where a flag lot was proposed. And so looking at each one of those, you see a multiplier effect when it comes to your neighborhood. You end up with 5 to 10 dissatisfied residents for every single instance that you have of a lot split occurring. So with that in mind, looking at the history behind this and looking at the regulations prior to 2011, the city ordinance prior to 2011 stood for 35 years, according to the planning department's report previously. There didn't seem to be a big uproar from 1976 to 2011 about the standards at that point in time, and those standards have now been put back into effect with the urgency ordinance, with the addition of explicitly clarifying no flag lot configurations within RS6. If you look at the general plan and the findings that are required as it relates to lot pattern, which Lisa spoke to, you could infer that flag lots in certain areas of the city wouldn't be allowed anyway, but the current urgency ordinance makes that explicitly clear. So in terms of the residents that I've spoken with, the Christians spoken with, and what our discussion has been, we're really offering up 3 points in terms of for consideration. The first one is to simply make the current urgency ordinance standards permanent, to revert to the 2011 standards as it relates to minimum lot size as well as the measurements associated with it. The second is to also, as part of the urgency ordinance, to make permanent the prohibition of flag lot or irregular lot configurations within the RS6 district area. And then finally, the last is to consider, if appropriate, potential spot zoning for parts of the city where certain streets or blocks have really identifying characteristics. So if you look at Carmelita as an example, where the average lot size might be higher than and still allow for lot splits with the relative standards of 2011 and prior, to take a look at some type of arrangement in terms of potential spot zoning to preserve the unique characteristics of those streets, which make that part of San Carlos and really a distinct part of both the city of good living and as well as good growth. Back to you, Christian.
So on a closing note, let's see. How do I get this to advance?
Page down.
Okay, that's okay. Page down.
Yeah, that's not working, is it?
There you go.
Almost had it. Yep.
Okay. Just to say that we have made the effort to help organize people to put together a website. It's got a lot of data. I mean, I and other residents spend a lot of time gathering data and generating analyses that I think have helped bubble this issue up. You can find that information there. We'd encourage you to go for 2 reasons, both as a source of information and if you want to get input and be aware of, kind of follow the efforts of this resident space initiative. You can enter your email there and we will put you on a list so you can get information. So there's a gentleman here, Josh, could you raise your hand for a minute, has a clipboard, so if you want to give an email in person, you could, or in the back, there's one there. So you can either go to the website or you can put your name down here. As you can see, you can also follow city sources of information as we move forward with both of these issues. So thank you.
Thank you very much, and I know you have worked very hard on this, Christian, and we appreciate all the effort that you've made. So, next up is Tom Dearden.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
I have the pleasure of living right across the street from the property that is sold recently on Carmelita. That it's everybody's understanding that it's going to be, or at least going to try to be split. It was sold for a great deal of money, so the only way the whole project would pencil out is if it could be split and 2 new homes built on it. Once again, we're talking about the character of the neighborhood. It would change dramatically the character of the neighborhood. And also because the creek runs down the back of it, he would probably have to use less of a setback than most of the homes on Carmelita have adhered to when they were originally built. My house and most of them are 25-foot setbacks or something about that, where this one would be less than that. So not only would it be higher density, but it would be closer to the street. So it truly would be out of character to the rest of the homes on the street. So obviously I'm not in favor of seeing that particular lot split. I understand that some lots, I was the advocate for housing for the Board of Realtors for 15 years, so I spoke in behalf of additional housing. So there are, I'm sure, lots in San Carlos that might complement a lot split, but under certain circumstances. But this one, I think most anybody that would drive down Carmelita, and I would imagine most everybody in this room has at one time or another, you can see glaringly that it will be out of character to the rest of the neighborhood. On the corner, they have done a lot split, but that lot, first of all, is on the corner, so it kind of is partly on the Alameda as well as Carmelita. They also have a certain setback. I'm hoping the setbacks will be sufficient that they don't represent the whole, what would be new if everybody on Carmelita started doing this. So, I'm assuming that really probably the greatest point that we can think about is the character of the neighborhoods that would be comparable to a lot split, and that they would keep San Carlos's personality.
Thank you. Next is Estelle Korngold.
Most of what I was going to say was presented very much better than I could have done by those two gentlemen. I live on Graceland, and it's been called the prettiest street in San Carlos, and whether it is or not, what makes it pretty is of course, we've lost a lot of pine trees, but also that almost once you get into Graceland, almost every lot is pretty good sized. And the one house, I don't know how they got permission, because I'm not sure that there was 40 feet for them, was really an in-law house to begin with, because I lived there that long. And then when they built the house, they had to put it in sideways. And if you don't think that looked odd, that you go down the street, but you might just miss it because the lot is so small. Anyhow, I thoroughly agree. What makes the San Carlos this beautiful city that it is that the good sized lots, and that's really what I was going to say. Is I hope you'll have limits to the sizes of the lots. The split should have a minimum size and a limit for, as you said, a limit to the size of the houses. I think that Menlo Park is a pretty good example of something like that, and it's a very desirable area. But anyhow, what I was going to say was much better with that presentation, and I'll be back.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it. Next up is, I'm going to butcher this, Connie Wallakonis. Really? First time for everything.
Hi, I'm Connie, and I've lived in San Carlos for 44 years. Thank you for that look. In March, a discussion started on Next Door Neighbor regarding the overdevelopment of the residential neighborhoods. And the last time I checked, there was about 209 comments. And I spent some time and read through all of those comments. And really what people were talking about, there was probably only a half a dozen or less people that really talked about the lot split. What seemed to be the bigger issue were huge houses, new or remodels being done on these small lots. That really, in my humble opinion, seems to be the much bigger issue. I'm actually not opposed to lot splits, but it's dependent upon the house being the appropriate size for the lot. And I think that's the key. As a matter of fact, I'm not even opposed to large houses. In this city, we have some houses that are between 5,000 square feet up to 6,500 square feet, but they're on half-acre and three-quarter lots, and that fits. It's a beautiful neighborhood. And so I'm not opposed to lot splits, but I do think that it's totally dependent on how big of a house is allowed on what size lot. Also, the thing that I noticed both in the Next Door Neighbor comments as well as just talking to my neighbors, the issues seem to be more about lot coverage, setbacks for both first floor and second floor, height limits, loss of privacy, loss of natural light or view due to kind of a monster house being built. So I would like to see the city address the issues of lot coverage, setbacks, and height limits of new homes.
Perfect, thank you. And just to be clear, we will be addressing those things too. It just, for whatever reason, a decision was made that it would be better to take them one at a time. And thank you. That one's next. Okay, next up is Kevin Frederick.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Good evening.
I want to compliment these people on the work they've been doing. And here's my card. You put me on your list. I want to join. My name is Kevin Frederick. I live on Carmelita. I bought my house there in 1983. It's the smartest thing I ever did. My purpose in speaking to you this evening is to stress that, in my opinion, the quality of life here in San Carlos is much more important than allowing speculators to split lots and build McMansions to tower over their neighbors. But first, I want to commend you all for your efforts in trying to buy the Black Mountain property and turn it into a park and prevent a 200-acre subdivision or 200-unit subdivision. I'm sorry that didn't work, but it was the right idea. So I hope that you keep those ideas in mind. Second, I'm opposed to lot splits. I'm opposed to flag lots. My lot on Carmelita is large enough to split. I could make a fortune. But I'm against it. Why? Because it would trash the neighborhood. It would trash my fellow San Carlosians. It would harm their property values. So I'm not going to do it. Let me tell you something else. I'm a real property attorney. That's right. I'm a litigator. When a house sells in San Carlos and the bulldozers come in, I get phone calls from my neighbors saying, Kevin, what can we do about this? And up until today, I've had to tell them, well, the city of San Carlos encourages these things, and there's very little you can do. And I'm glad to see you're all here tonight because that's what I've told them to do. In the future, if this doesn't happen, there may be lawsuits. Who knows? In 1985, a lot was split on San Carlos that would be west of the Alameda on the north side of the street. Two gigantic towering hulks were built that were totally incompatible with the rest of the neighborhood. It looks like two battleships parked in a little yacht harbor. Yes, don't laugh, it happened. And it was horrendous for the entire neighborhood. Right next to them was a little tiny cottage. We on Carmelita, we used to be a collection of cottages as second homes for rich people in San Francisco on the creek. My house is on the creek. I cherish the creek. The house next door to me sold earlier this year for almost $2 million. I was terrified, as I'm sure you all are, that the owners would bulldoze it down and I'd be forced to, yes, file a lawsuit to stop a McMansion. Fortunately, it took all the money they had to buy the house, and so they haven't bulldozed it down. Thank God.
So, Mr. Frederick, if I can ask you to wrap it up, if you could.
I'm going to wrap it up.
Thank you, sir.
It's a free country.
It is indeed.
Okay. So I would point out this lot split on Carmelita as testimony to the greed and indifference of developers and a failure of our regulatory system. It should never have happened. I therefore urge the staff and the commission to recommend to council to adopt the proposed resolution rolling back to the pre-2011 requirements, dropping down what can be split and what can't. I obviously oppose flag lots. I also urge the staff and the commission and the council, as I'm sure everybody here does, to reconsider the existing setback rules, the lot coverage rules, and the height rules. It's time to stop these incredibly ugly McMansions built towering over their neighbors and destroying the quality of life here in San Carlos. Thank you very much.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate it. Okay, next up is John Hoffman.
Good evening, Commissioners.
Good evening.
I am not for or against on this issue, but I want to point out a couple of things. There are goals to increase the amount of housing in the city of San Carlos, as with every city along the peninsula. There are goals to make housing more affordable. That may be an oxymoron in our case, but that is one of the goals. The only way that is achieved is by the market providing additional housing. Now, whether that's housing that goes up in the air or whether it's housing that occurs because of a lot split is almost academic. It only occurs when it's economically sensible and somebody is prepared to make a development. We are at a stage where nearly any new development needs to knock something down. We are a mature city, roughly 90 years old, I think, at this point. So you should anticipate that this really is going to be a physical requirement. The highest and best use of the land is another thing that should be considered. Is it better to provide 2 out of 1 or maintain simply 1? What I've heard thus far, I think, is from people who are longtime residents of the city. It brings to mind NIMBYism, that I have mine and I don't really care about anybody else coming in or anything other than preserving what I have and what I like. I hope that the city of San Carlos, in addition to being a city of good living, will also be a city of good sense. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So next up is Jeff Smith. Oh, I think this was the another item. Unless Jeff Smith also wants to speak on lot splits, I'm assuming not. Okay. Next up is James Sherba.
I'm up here to advocate a rollback to the pre-2011 stipulations. It was called Title 18, I think, that was seemed to be an addendum. I think that should be removed. And the minimum size back to 10,000 feet, and I think it was 65-foot coverage. Also want to add, as the resident of Carmelita so succinctly described the trashing of his neighborhood, we're now experiencing that with the lot split on my block on White Oak Way, 2115. Our worst concerns have been met. We've got semi-tractor scrap trucks, concrete mixers, any imaginable huge construction implement invading the neighborhood while school is getting in and out at White Oak School 1 block away. A serious safety issue. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Next up is Mr. DiMattei.
I have a personal issue about this because my name's Raymond DiMattei and I live on 2065 White Oak. I am a victim of lot splitting due to the current building codes and their interpretation by the Planning Department and Commission. This led to an approval of 2-story houses next to my rancher. And because the developer spent over $2.25 million, he had to have a 2-story solution to his 2 houses to make his profit. Now I have one of these 2-story houses less than 10 feet away from my house, darkening it and removing the nearby trees, at least half a dozen, and the foliage that I used to view. What angers me about this lot splitting is that it was done over the opposition of the majority of my neighbors who believe that these tall houses will not fit in with our neighborhood. I moved to San Carlos due to its rural setting. However, all the reconstruction currently occurring, I'm afraid that we'd be left with a glorified tract housing suburb. As I walk or drive around our town, I can see that we're being overrun by construction projects. Most of this work is being done by developers who view San Carlos as a gold mine. I do not believe that the infilling of our town is going to help the current housing crisis, or will it be affordable housing either. I cannot believe that all this lot splitting is done by local residents. What we have here is land speculation and profit. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next up is Ron Granville.
Good evening. I've lived in San Carlos my entire life. I grew up in the White Oaks area. For the past 34 years, I lived in the 1900 block of Carmelita. My lot is considered large. It's one that under the, I guess it would be current before you had the moratorium rules, could be split. I'm steadfastly against that, and I have a few thoughts about it. First, I'd like to thank the Commission for taking the time to address this very important issue to the quality of life in our neighborhoods. Second, I'd like to thank staff who's been very helpful over the last few months for us to understand how the process works, because when the first lot split on our block, we didn't know how the process worked. Subdivision rules should preserve the quality of life for the larger number of residents in the area, not just provide a financial windfall for a select few property owners. Further subdivisions within our neighborhoods that are zoned for single-family use adversely impact the adjoining property values, the quality of life, the increased congestion, parking, and noise within the neighborhoods. This isn't really about NIMBYism. San Carlos has a housing plan. It's already added 455 new housing units that are either under construction or approved for construction. It additionally has, as I understand, quite a large number of lots that are already zoned for more intense subdivision or use. I don't know how many additional units would be added there, but I believe they're kind of between El Camino and, say, Cedar and San Carlos Avenue and Arroyo or something like that. It's a lot more housing that can be added there. Per the staff report for this meeting, San Carlos already has 2.5 times the number of new units either under construction or approved that are required to meet the city's housing element. So again, it's not about NIMBYism. The prior subdivision rules that required post-split lot size of minimum 10,000 square feet, 65-foot frontage, served San Carlos well for many years. The traffic and on-street parking in our neighborhoods are already too much. They shouldn't be made worse by squeezing in more homes. Also, just a couple things struck me tonight. Our neighborhoods really shouldn't be changed by a footnote. It's kind of odd that this whole thing came up because we had a rule for 35 years. The rule stayed the same and a footnote changed it. The standard that's under the current rules is 5,000 square feet. But only 13% of the lots in the town are 5,000 square feet. Why should we make the lowest common denominator the rule for what can happen? If you look at the map they put up about lots that are splittable under the current rules versus what would be, there is a real concentration. They're concentrated on Carmelita, Knoll, and Bell. We happen to think those are three nice, somewhat unique neighborhoods, ones that we can't recreate in San Carlos, because nobody's going to tear down 2 or 3 homes to make one. And the fact that, there's only been 6 lot splits since 2011, that's kind of interesting, but the market has changed, and I view this as a snowballing. As I said, I've lived on my block for 34 years. I grew up here. There was never a lot split on Carmelita. There was one done earlier this year, and the only other house that sold since then was marketed in a way so that the only person that would buy it would be a developer, because he'd pay more money than the families who wanted to buy it and just live in the house as it was. So I'm against further crowding of our existing single-family neighborhoods. I urge the city to return to the pre-2011 lot split requirements. Those served the city well for over 35 years, and I thank you for your support.
Thank you. So just to give folks an idea of where we are, I have 8 more speaker slips, so I'm going to go through those. If someone who hasn't turned in a speaker slip would like to speak, it'd be great if you filled one out. Then I'll ask anyone else who's here who hasn't filled one out who'd like to speak, and then we'll move on to our comments and next steps. So with that indicated, next up is Cheryl Quinn.
Thank you. I've been a resident of San Carlos for 25 years, and I'm currently a supporter of improvement and good growth. Thank you tonight. Previously, we've been known as the City of Good Living, but we seem to be under siege by the developers due to our favorable codes surrounding single-family and home zoning, and we've now become the City of Good Profits for developers, and they're preying on our town for their personal profits and eroding our community that we've all here worked so hard to cultivate. My work and my daily life takes me through the streets of San Mateo, Belmont, Redwood City every day, and Mountain View even. And none of these cities have the sheer volume of building that we have in both our neighborhoods and our thoroughfares. And during this lot splits review, I'm thrilled that Brent and Christian brought forward, like we saw in June, the other communities, because I really feel we need to take that into account, because we've become the area that they've been preying on in San Carlos. And everyone in this room will say, San Carlos is no Redwood City and we're no Belmont. We're very unique, and we've seen a trend that the homeowners that used to develop their homes improve them for their own benefit, with respect to their neighbors, very tastefully, very uniquely. It's all become a place where developers are coming in and maximizing their profits with no concern for our very unique and special community. Subdivision rules should preserve the quality of life for the larger number of the citizens in the area, not just the profits for the developers. And on record, as I've sent to the council and to you all, there's a developer in town that has been on record as saying a developer's dream is to take one lot and split it into 2. And we need to stop this, and I'm a proponent of stopping the lot splits and reverting back to 2011.
Thank you, ma'am. So next up is, I don't have a name, I have an address, 2120, 2124 Greenwood Avenue in San Carlos. Thank you. Oh, well, I'm happy to butcher it for you.
That's all right. My name is Carrington Kajawa, and I've lived in San Carlos for 17 years. I've grown up in the peninsula my whole life. When my husband and I first bought our first house, it was on Elm Street. It was a cute little bungalow. With our children, we outgrew the house, and we moved to a lot that I found walking one day that had 2 addresses on it. It was 2120 and 2124. When we went to go purchase this property, it was actually one of the original mayors of San Carlos's home, and he very interestingly had zoned it not for residential but for commercial, so I could put a multiplex unit on it, and this is on Greenwood Avenue. So when we purchased the property, we changed it back to an R1 zoning with an in-law unit, even though it has 2 addresses. The reason we liked this house was because it afforded us a much bigger piece of property to grow our family in, but also with the feeling that if we couldn't continue to afford it, that we did have possibly the option to subdivide it in order to afford to stay where we were. So partially, I'm here to say that I like the option. I don't know that I'll ever subdivide my property, but to be not given the opportunity to have that, if that's so given, we have definitely the size of a lot that could be subdivided. But I wouldn't want that right to be taken away, especially for what we've paid for the property these days.
So how large is your lot?
It's over 13,000 square feet.
Okay. So, okay, thank you. Next is Kim Boyanowski.
Hi, thank you. And yes, my name is Kim Boyanowski. My husband and I have lived in San Carlos for about 20 years. We love San Carlos. We call it our home. We call it our home for our businesses. We moved here to a condo 20 years ago. We bought a house 10 years ago. and now I'm a resident of Carmelita and have bought my third house here. The reason I bought my house in Carmelita just recently is because I value the ability to have different diverse neighborhoods of different sizes and different abilities and different styles of uniqueness. And part of the reason we bought in Carmelita was because of the uniqueness of the size of the neighborhood and the lots. And I purposely bought that because we didn't want that lot subdivided. We feel that neighborhood is very unique. And with due respect to the committee that has said that there might not be a cluster, we feel like there is a cluster of space where those homes are larger there, or at least the lots. And when we bought the lot, it was sold to us with the ability to subdivide that. And part of the reason we wanted that lot was because we wanted to continue to have those large lots to be single-family homes. We are in the process of trying to change or redo a home there, and we're very respectful to the neighbors and the neighbors around us. We've included in all of our conversations. But making these lots split so that these homes can be, you can put multiple homes in my new lot, I could put 2 homes on, changes that neighborhood completely. These are homes that we want to be the city of not just good living, but the city of good neighbors. And we want our neighborhood to feel like that and not someone to come in, take a lot that we know we all pay too much money for, divide it up, and leave. And so that they're not going to be a city of good neighbors. We want to be a city of good neighbors, and by doing that, neighbors need to buy homes to live in those homes, not buy lots and flip them for them to be taken to the maximum amount of dollar value you can take out of that. So my opinion is that we should stop and revert to the 2011 rules where those lots should be a minimum of 10,000 square feet and preserve neighborhoods where those neighborhoods have uniqueness that bring people and attract people to San Carlos.
Thank you. Sorry, one second here. Having a technology problem, which I don't think is my problem. It's you broke it, David. I broke it. The timer isn't working anymore. I'm pretty sure I didn't break it. So I'm going to revert to my old technology for timers. Oh, you can reset me? Okay. No. But it's nothing personal.
Here, do you want to time it? I'll time it.
What's that? It's okay. I got it. It's all right. All right. Coming up is Steve Jadikian. Now, how do I do? How would I do it right? Gadikian. All right. Thank you. Sorry about that.
No worries. Thank you for taking the time. So I'm not going to add a lot more to this conversation than what my neighbors have already done. Christian and team did a great job of representing the issues, and so I guess the first point here is that obviously, like my other neighbors on Carmelita, I'm in favor of returning to the previous rules pre-2011. I'm also sympathetic to those who are struggling with the issue of flag lots and lend my support, whatever support I can on that topic. And, unlike many of my neighbors who have lived and grew up in San Carlos, I moved to San Carlos. I moved specifically to that street because of the unique characteristics of that street. I would hate to see that be taken away. I paid a premium to live in that area precisely for the character of that the neighborhood affords. And so I would hate to see that go away. And if there's only one bright spot that came out of this whole thing so far, is that I got to meet all of my neighbors and how wonderful they all are, and so that's been a good thing that came out of this. But I would appreciate your support in this topic. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up is Yvette Royce. It worked, thank you. The reset worked.
Great. Evening, Commissioners.
Good evening.
I'm here because I, like most of the people, are unhappy with the lot split ordinance that's currently in place. But I am happy that you're taking the time to let us speak and to also study this situation. So thank you for that. Splitting lots really does, I think, add numerous negatives to our city, which a lot of them I'm already feeling just due to the increase of people. We've had a recent influx, I would say, of people in cars in San Carlos in the last 5 to 10 years, and I'm already noticed increased congestion. I used to be able to go from Cordilleras and turn right onto San Carlos Avenue, no problem. Now I get there in the mornings, I wait a good 5 minutes. There's cars backed up, and obviously that's just one of many, many areas in the city that are much more congested. And so I was wondering, what is the drive here as to why we need to split these lots? And I was curious about that housing element. I never knew something like that existed, but it sounds like we are being asked as a city to have 183 new market rate units available by 2023. And then I hear that we currently have 455 units already approved or under construction. So, if that isn't the case, why are we rushing to split these lots? I mean, I really just don't have an answer to that other than money for the developers. And I was wondering about this housing element, but that doesn't seem to be the case. So there are way more negative elements, I think, affect here that are being affected, as have been mentioned by many of the people. And I just, like the rest of the people, think San Carlos is a very unique and special place, and I would hate to see that change. I mean, I feel like it already is starting to slip away. And when I talk to my friends, I mean, a lot of people are concerned, and they're not happy. There are unfavorable things being said, so I'd hate to see an increase of houses, which would of course lead to more cars, more people, more congestion, more noise, more construction, and even the infrastructure suffers. So in light of all that, I would appreciate if you would request that the council roll back the ordinance to 2011. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Joanna Ambrosio. Okay, not seeing her. Moving on, there's two more. Kevin O'Connor. Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to rush you.
You thought she was a part of the crew leaving? Yeah.
Yes, there seemed like a bunch of folks were leaving, and I thought you were part of them. I apologize.
Good evening, Commissioners, and thank you also for taking on this important issue. On behalf of my husband, Jeffrey Kaiser, who couldn't be with us this evening, and myself, I have the following comments. We've lived in San Carlos for 36 years, and we believe the changing of the lot splits regulations as they were modified in 2011 has resulted in unintended harm to some of our San Carlos neighborhoods. For decades, we have had some larger lots in our neighborhoods that have provided diversity to our city landscape and great pride in ownership within the neighborhood. Now, these neighborhoods are under attack, as you've heard from the prior speakers. So, a lot of what I was going to say has already been said, so I'm not going to take the time to do that. But we suggest we roll back the rules to the pre-2011 set of regulations. And let's remove the harm and unintended consequences of the 2011 changes and preserve our unique city's look and neighborhood feel. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Kevin O'Connor.
On the home stretch here. So good evening, Commissioners. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. And still opposed to the lot splits, as noted in my prior letters over the last months, and all my neighbors have done a nice job explaining a lot of the key points. Just want to make sure that San Carlos has rules that are not an outlier and can be exploited by developers. I want to reiterate that my neighbors on White Oak remain universally opposed. We know that ship has sailed and that's happening, but not only opposed, but talking to my neighbors, they're actually saddened by the lot split. That's really the only term I could say from 2115. And really, I come here just to make sure we avoid this in other neighborhoods. There's not really very many more that can happen in my neighborhood, but at least immediate one. So thank you for thoroughly researching and exploring this topic, and I too would like to see the rules revert to pre-2011. And the one other point I want to make is that those prior rules were likely thoughtfully arrived at, and the true aberration, I think, in the last decades has been post-2008. So really 2008 to 2011 is, as many of us, that was really the outlier of the last 60 or 70 years. So since it was such an outlier economic period, I just question why stick with rules made at that time. They were probably done thoughtfully, but I think they really have to be re-examined because that was a strange time. So thank you.
Next up is Carl Mills, I'm sorry.
My name is Carl Mills. I live at 232 Exeter. And I bought a lot in the late 80s and wanted to build a house that I could have for my family. And when I built that house, I went to the planning department and I received the subdivision rules for my neighborhood. And it said I had to have a certain setback, I had to have a maximum lot coverage, I had to have a maximum house height. And I thought that that was really a pact between myself and the city. And part of my part of the pact was to really recognize and honor those codes. And the city's pact was to make sure that my subdivision maintained those codes and the houses didn't get more dense, so that if I bought into a neighborhood because I wanted a certain feel, that neighborhood and that feel was going to survive. My house is not grand, it's a few thousand square feet, but I love my neighborhood and I would hate to see it get more dense. Thank you.
Thank you. So that's all the speaker slips I have. Bonnie, you don't need to give me a speaker slip. I know who you are, Bonnie. I know who you are, Bonnie.
And anyway, helps with the minutes.
All right, Bonnie, you get 30 seconds.
I was going to say, give her 4 minutes.
Okay.
All right, Bonnie, I'm going to start the timer anyway.
Okay, Bonnie McClure, representing Sierra Club, not the Residential Design Review Committee, for which I plead guilty for the last 14 years. I'm here to speak to the point that the lot splits are out in the single-family residential unit space, and that's not where we need the housing. We need the housing down by the transit. When they speak of the housing element, we need to have multifamily housing down by El Camino, down on the flat. We don't need it in our specialized neighborhoods. I would like to see the lots being gathered together, bunched together downtown, so that we could have multifamily housing down there because we have enough units for the market rate. It's the affordable housing that we need in this community. The whole peninsula needs it. And I beg you to consider that save the neighborhoods for the single family. Don't bring more families into those neighborhoods. We need it downtown. Thank you.
So that concludes my speaker slips. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Please come on up. I'm going to you have a question?
Available on the internet?
Yes, sir.
Good question.
So Paul Vickerman.
Yeah, I was in New Orleans this past weekend, and I was going through the Garden District, and you had mansion. And then you also had spec houses. And what I found funny was that you had, I don't know if they had zoning back then, but you had spec houses that were done 150 years ago, and they were kind of out of character 150 years ago, and they're still out of character. And my point is that the decisions we make now don't just last 5 or 10. I mean, literally, we're talking 150 years from now. And granted, we're Americans and we're Californians, and most of us don't think very far in the future, in the past. And my point is that maybe we should be a little more thoughtful of the decisions we make now and how the impact they have 50, 100, couple hundred years from now. Thanks.
Thank you. There was another hand up. Yes, sir.
Hi, everyone. Simon Dedman. I've been here
What do I know? I've worked with Christian on this kind of stuff, and I agree with the sentiment of all of this stuff, but not really the technicality. And to speak to Connie's point, this feels very much about the house size on small lot issue, which subsumes this lot split issue. And everything, I haven't heard anything today, or really in any of these talks, where the lot split issue is really the problem. It's all about big houses, the light, the shade, the invasion of privacy, all of these issues which seems that we all agree with. But I don't know how much lot splits is actually affected by this, and it feels like it would be a shame if just by dint of peculiarity of administration that we're dealing with this first, that people like Kim would have their ability to sell half of their plot and make a profit off it and sell it to a house or a developer that's going to put a nice in-keeping house on that, to be prevented from doing that just because this issue came up first. I'm not blaming anyone for this issue coming up first. But, and just another side point, I feel like once we get onto that issue, the house, McMansion, whatever we're going to call it, sorting out code issues like the change of character or the in-keeping with the neighbourhood thing, formalising what we actually mean by that, it feels that would probably take care of the Carmelita issue. If that really is, as we've seen on Lisa's excellent presentation, a cluster of these bigger lots, then if we say that is part of the character of Carmelita, then maybe those would not be splittable. And so then you're left with, how many would you see? 254, loads of those were Carmelita. We're hardly talking about any other properties in San Carlos that we're even talking about for lot splits and flag lots. And if we can't put McMansions on them because of the rules we're hopefully going to change anyway, then we're really just denying people like Kim and a small handful of people who might like to profit quite fairly and allow these places to be developed as we need to do for San Carlos to increase our numbers without really screwing everyone over or anyone over. It's just my point. Anyway, thanks.
Sure. Was there anyone else who hasn't had an opportunity to speak who would like to speak?
I just have a question.
Yes, sir.
How does all this reflect with what they call granny units?
It doesn't. I mean, there are the city.
About more housing on lots.
No, sir. It's a reasonable question, but no. There are separate rules that govern when you can put a granny unit on a property, and the city recently liberalized those to make it easier to do that. But what we're actually talking about today is creating two legally separate lots, and it's a different thing. So I don't have any more speakers. I'm going to do something slightly unusual here. I don't want to put anybody on the spot, so please don't feel free not to. But I was going to ask folks who haven't spoken, who are opposed to lot splits, if you would just raise your hand. Okay. Okay. And is there anyone here who hasn't spoken, who is in favor of lots? And again, please don't. This is unscientific, and I know I'm kind of causing folks to have to identify themselves. You don't have to do it. Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Okay, so moving on to the next item, which I think is questions from the commission. Does anyone have any questions that they want to ask staff? Yeah, you want to start?
I do, sure. Just a question. One of the questions I had at the meeting in June was actually how many pre-existing 40-foot square lots we had, or at least had prior to 2011. And the reason that I mention that is that if you look in the original presentation, it said that we had made 40 feet the width because it conformed with pre-existing lot widths. And I even though you said how many could be divided, I don't really see how many actually exist. So is that something we can get for me by the next?
Certainly, and we anticipated there would be a request for additional queries using our GIS consultant. So if the commission would like to see a map of all RS6 lots that have a lot width, I guess that would be equal to I mean, not greater than, but equal to or less than 40. Probably not too much less than, but we can certainly run that for the commission.
Yeah. Thank you. And then next, I wanted to ask staff a question. I don't know if you've had time to look at the numbers that Christian showed today, but I do know that those numbers are consistent with what Christian showed in June. And my question is that those numbers and those comparable charts to our other surrounding communities, do you agree that those are accurate, or do you have any challenges with those numbers and their assertions and how they're interpreted in those tables?
Well, staff hasn't done a complete evaluation we haven't started a comparison. I mean, we will certainly work with Christian. I'd be happy to, meet with him personally. I believe you had some assistance by an architect friend of yours. We can talk about that offline, certainly. But to answer your question, no, we haven't gone through a thorough analysis to confirm those numbers.
I just want to make sure that when we are making recommendation about policy, that again is going to be hopefully long-lasting, that we're all talking about the same correct set of numbers.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then my next question, if I can read my own not good writing, is so under the 2011 regulations, which we are now back under because of the emergency moratorium, the minimum lot size is still 5,000 square feet, right? It's just that the subdivision minimum size is 10,000.
That is correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
And I just wanted to clarify that because, again, if we're making policy recommendations moving forward and if we're comparing ourselves to communities that are nearby that have minimum lots of, say, 6,500 or so on and so forth, I think we need to be looking at different numbers than we've even discussed at this meeting today. So I guess, are we going to add or recommend that there be a different minimum size, or does staying under the 2011 policy then put us in that weird discontent that made that footnote necessary to begin with?
When staff brings forward the discussion on development standards under Title 18 zoning ordinance, often referred to as the manner in which we're going to address the house size concern, we can certainly take a look at that because that is part of the development standards associated with the RS Single Family Zoning District. But you are correct that one of the reasons that we did make that change in 2011 was to make them consistent and in line with each other because there had been the minimum lot size standard of 5,000 square feet prior to the zoning ordinance being comprehensively updated. It was always a minimum of 5,000. But the difference was that when there was a subdivision application, the minimum size was different. So in 2011, we wanted to make those more in alignment with each other.
Right. Which then now would essentially make our de facto minimum lot size, I guess, just for subdivisions, it would be 10,000, but we're still in a weird discrepancy under the moratorium. Am I understanding that correctly?
The 5,000 square foot lots or any size lot within the city would still be legal but non-conforming to the minimum lot size. If there were land was all merged back together and then re-subdivided, it would need to fall within the subdivision regulations.
You're reading my mind. Thank you. Okay, those are my questions. I have some comments as we move forward, and I can wait on those if you want, but particularly around flag lots.
Go for it.
Okay, so I have to say I'm actually surprised to see that we have 41 flag lots in San Carlos. That actually really surprised me. And I guess...
I know we have at least 42 because there's one that's not on that list.
Oh, okay. Well, then, all right. 42 it is. I take David's word as absolute. Ineffable. So I guess my question is that if we're going to disallow flag lots, then we are making 42 flag lots non-conforming. And I'm wondering, however, if we keep it the way we currently have it, where we just make the determination based on the character of the neighborhood, I don't know that I'm incredibly comfortable with that, because I think we have had these conversations about character of the neighborhood for all 5 years I've been on the commission, and I don't know that every time we talk about things being out of character for the neighborhood, there seems to be some legal reason that we can't make that determination, or it just seems that it's so up to varied interpretation that it ends up
It's because it's
being a
subjective
challenge.
criteria.
Right. Okay. So the character criteria. So I guess I'm not saying that we necessarily need to disallow it if it makes sense in certain neighborhoods, but I am saying that we absolutely need to we can't just say character of the neighborhood and leave it like that. We need to make the criteria much more specific. And that's just my comment on flag lots. So, all right.
I wanted to point out something too on the flag lots, so attachment number 9. The lots that are under 10,000 square feet categorized, over half of them are basically large subdivisions or master planned areas. So if you take, I think it's 8 or 9 of them fall in that category. It only really leaves 5 or 6 that are under 10,000 square feet. Just kind of, since Dave, you mentioned that there's one more flag lot that's not on the list, I wanted to point out that it's unusual to have a flag lot under 10,000 square foot. And so I wanted to point that out for that. I think, and I don't know if this is correct, but I think 5 out of the 6 applications we've probably heard as a commission. Don, you're off the hook because you're the newbie, but in every subdivision or every lot split that we've done, it's probably been the hardest. There hasn't been one that was easy for these very reasons. So, when we're in either the commission or the RDRC, we're following what the rules are right now. Just like if you were, an applicant requesting the same thing. So, I'm glad we have the moratorium right now. I'm glad we're having the study session, and this is something that we've actually asked for too, many times, because we understand it as residents of San Carlos, and every application that we've had, it's somewhat been an issue, but we are at this point following what's written. So those are my comments for right now. I'll probably come back with a couple more. I don't know if that was helpful or just took up more time. Probably just took up more time.
No, it's helpful. So looking at the presentation, because one of the residents of Carmelita basically indicated that they didn't want any of their lots on Carmelita subdivided regardless of the size. It looks to me from the material you provided, if we were to revert back to 2011, there would only be one lot on Carmelita that would still be subdividable, and that would be the one that is across from the one that was just subdividable on the corner of Carmelita and Alameda de las Pulgas. Is that right?
Based upon looking at just parcel size, cross slope, and lot width, yes. However, I think one of the members of the public noted that there is an existing creek that runs along the backside of those properties, and the city and the Planning Commission knows, and we've looked at applications that have this feature. There are setback requirements from the creek as well that could impact the overall developable, whether or not a lot could be divisible and then constructed with 2 new homes on it. So there may need to be more careful evaluation with this particular lot, given the creek that's located behind it, to say absolutely that it could be subdivided. And I'm glad that you asked the question, because again, these lots here that are shown on the map have the potential to be. And of course, without further review by licensed land surveyors or civil engineers, we can't guarantee that they are 100% divisible at this point, but there is a potential for it.
So, with the permit.
Excuse me, can I ask a question on that point? So when you look at lot size, and you're talking about that one lot being potentially subdivisible, but the creek setback of 25 feet, taking part of that away as buildable, it's still part of the calculation for divisible, correct? it does not mean it's buildable. So when you're looking at 10,000 square feet, that's still part of that number. It's just not something you can build on, just like a front setback, correct?
I mean, I don't,
Clearly on that parcel.
it sounds right. You can answer. Yeah.
So it's part of the calculation for not part of the buildable space, correct?
That is correct.
So does staff want to comment at all? I mean, the comment about dividing up, the issue of subdivision and housing standards. Does staff want to comment on why they think it's better to take those separately? One moment, sir, if you don't mind.
Thank you. I'd just like to confer with the director.
I would confer with Mr. Alcivay as well,
as you might imagine, we've had discussions about this. So to answer your question, from a practical standpoint, there are two reasons. The first is that there is an urgency ordinance in place with an expiration date of May of next year. And some of the comments that we heard from the council when they put this moratorium in place is there didn't seem to be support for extending it yet. I think the city attorney can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there is one more possibility to extend that moratorium for another certain period of time. And the council wasn't interested in that. They prefer that we have these discussions and move forward with a recommendation. So we want to make sure that we allow enough time to be able to meet that deadline, if you will. The other practical issue is that if we were to combine this with development standards, we know that the development standards for house size will take longer. They're more complex. From a technical aspect, there are many interrelated standards that regulate overall house size within the RS6 zoning district, and those need to be carefully evaluated, how they work together, where one regulation might impact another development standard within the code. So that will, by necessity, take a little bit longer than the lot split. So we wanted to move forward with the lot splits now, and then, as many of the people mentioned, their concerns about house size, we will be soon starting a process to dive into those issues as well. So there will be a little bit of overlap while we discuss lot splits, and at the point in which we're going to get started on discussing house size. But we believe that house size can be tied to overall lot size, working with the development standards in place. There's nothing to prevent us from addressing house size within the context of a lot size within the zoning ordinance itself. So that's another reason why we decided to separate them out.
Okay. Did you want to come back up, sir? I prefer that you don't, only because then everybody starts speaking from there, and I lose what limited control I have.
Fair enough. So just briefly then, is there any scope for the Commission to handle the house size thing before the lot splits by punting the this lot splits issue into long grass or extending it? I know you said there was no appetite to do that, but it certainly seems like from the talks you guys were just having, the ability to work out how to work out the flag lots with the in keeping with the neighbourhood problem you guys have mentioned before, and Bonnie's said as well that you've had your hands tied by that a little bit because it is subjective, but it feels like that's one of the core issues that's going to be dealt with the house on lot size issue.
Well,
so if that's tackled, I kind of suspect that a lot of the problem, the lot splits issue, will be gone by the time we get around to lot splits.
Yes, sir. And you know what? I think that you might be wrong. With due respect, and I'll tell you why. And I'll tell you why. There's two issues, and I think that you're seeing them. One is, of course, large houses on small lots. But folks like Mr. DiMattei, and I don't know if he's still here. It looks like he may have left. His concern is that just by having two houses, unless you made them so small that they really weren't economical for the developers, he's going to lose the space that he had. The folks on Carmelita, they believe that the character of their neighborhood requires that additional space between houses. And regardless of whether you allow a 3,000 square foot house or a 2,000 square foot house, 29 feet versus 27 feet, when you only have a 10-foot setback, that's very different than when you have a 40-foot setback.
Absolutely
and
agree.
so that's, and I'm not, this is not the day for a decision, and I'm trying to keep an open mind, even though I asked for this. I'm not the only one, but I asked for this. But there is, I don't know that at least for some people, it would be settled simply by changing the housing standards.
No, I'm sure you're absolutely right.
And what staff was indicating was, City Council has signaled to us fairly strongly that they want us to resolve the lot split issue by March. And so if we were to punt on that and the City Council were to call our metaphorical bluff, the result would be that folks could just start splitting houses, splitting lots again,
Right.
which I guarantee would make certain people very unhappy.
The big house issue could be
Correct.
satisfactorily
Yes.
dealt with.
So I'm not trying to call you out. I think that your position is very reasonable and very well articulated. But I don't think that you're necessarily right for everybody.
Right. Okay.
Fair enough. Okay.
One more thing, though, too, just make sure that on a street like ours,
Do you want to come on up?
Yeah, so one more thing, just because we're such a small, minute little street, we're not Carmelita and things like that, but we have some very large properties on our particular part of Greenwood, and they're unique in the sense that they're very small frontages and they're very deep and wide in the back. And so the only way to access to the back is through a flag lot. You couldn't subdivide the front, so of course it would make it an irregular lot. But they're coming on the market, they will be on the market, I guarantee you, in the next 10 to 15 years, and they're going to become, they're large lots. And if you block them from that, I mean, they have large homes on them right now, but it is going to come up.
Yeah. So looking at the.
So I just say, take it case by case. Make sure that you're looking not just at Carmelita, look across the board at those people that are impacted by it.
Sure. And I want to respond to that, and you can sit down or stand, depending upon what is your preference. I'd note, based on my understanding of San Carlos, which is not as good as some of the folks who've been living here longer, and looking at this diagram, it looks like if we were to roll back to the 2011 standards, there are no houses on Greenwood that could be subdivided, because, I'm looking at where Greenwood would be, which is just immediately south of Britain. There's no yellow there. So if we were to roll back to 2011, none of the lots would be large enough on Greenwood to be subdivided anymore. But I think what you're saying is if we were to not roll back, we would still need to allow flag lots in order to allow those houses on Greenwood to be subdivided. And I hear that, and I don't know what the result is going to be. Okay, I think Mr. Bradley, did you have any questions or comments?
Comments. I want to acknowledge and tell you how much we appreciate all of you coming out. This truly shows that we are the city of good living and good neighbors. We can agree to disagree on items, but we do it in a friendly spirit, and I appreciate that very much. I'm new to the Planning Commission, but I'm learning a lot. This is the largest crowd that I've experienced here. I think we have a good opportunity to look in the zoning ordinance and investigate floor area ratios that might help the oversized houses on the smaller lots in many cases. I don't view this as an all or nothing issue either. There can be adjustments. It doesn't mean that the City Council is going to stick with the 10,000 to 5,000 lot split or just say no. Either way, there might be an adjustment in between that could satisfy a lot of the situation. Since there's only been really 5 or 6 lot splits in the last half a decade, we do have time, I think we can refer to the RDRC for design review in these. If we're to keep flag lots for larger lots, every lot is unique, you know.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, does anyone else have anything before we move on to the next, which is guidance for staff?
I mean, just a quick note, because the 435 units as meeting our housing needs was brought up many times, and I just wanted to make a note that those 435 housing units are because of Transit Village, which also had a lot of opposition, Wheeler Plaza that had some opposition, mixed use developments that have had a lot of opposition, and multi-unit houses that have, or facilities that have had a lot of opposition. And I just want us to remember that, because this might be the largest crowd you've seen, but you were lucky enough to have missed Transit Village. Yeah. And and I was not. And just remember that when we say no to certain types of houses, we are shifting a burden to another neighborhood and other residents who will then feel put upon. And maybe that's the right thing to do for a number of reasons, closer to transit, all sorts of other reasons. But I just want us to remember that people that live in the hills of San Carlos aren't the only people that live in San Carlos, and it's important that we remember that going forward. That's it.
Yeah, none of those projects were easy.
Nope.
None of those 435 units were easy. And they're not even built yet.
They were all really, really fought for.
So guidance for staff, I mean, really it seems like right now the only guidance, this is not agendized as an action item, so we can ask staff to bring us additional information that we haven't received, and you've asked for some of that, Angela. Does anyone else want particular information from staff that they haven't received here on the commission? No? Was there anyone out in the public who, and I'm not saying you're going to get it, but is there anyone out there in the public who wants some additional information that they believe will help us make a decision? Yes, sir, if you don't mind standing.
For the area that's zoned already, where it can be upzoned to multifamily, you know, that area is San Carlos Avenue, kind of Arroyo, Cedar to El Camino. For what hasn't been approved or built yet, how many more units can be added in that area?
That's a good question.
That's a very good question.
That's a great question. If staff can reasonably give us an estimate, that would be very nice.
And maybe give us an idea as to what pending applications or something coming down the pike on those as well.
We can certainly bring back information in terms of what's been submitted or pre-applications that we've received. But just to clarify, Ron, can you describe to me the area that you're looking at? You mentioned San Carlos Avenue.
I can't describe the color that you're touching.
Well,
So RM59, RM.
okay. And through the chair, if you like, I can work with Ron offline and address his comments and bring that back at the next study session.
Yeah, and I think that though, without needing, I don't think that Ron or even we are necessarily looking for like some level of scientific specificity. I think that what Ron is interested in having an understanding is, you know, how much more housing stock approximately could be built downtown with current zoning, you know, an estimate of sorts that, you know, without creating an enormous amount of work. I think that's what he's looking for. And if it's difficult or really difficult, then obviously don't do it. But if you can give us a reasonable estimate, I think that would be helpful.
I think we could be able to do that.
Thanks. Anyone else? Okay, so we've got the information, or we will have the information that we need. So I think that really the only other remaining decision is whether we have one more study session before we make the recommendation to the council, which is how it's currently scheduled, or whether we simply make the recommendation at the next meeting. You know, I frankly believe we could make the decision at the next meeting. My only concern is I know that it went out in the city bulletin and the glossy saying that we were going to have 3 meetings, and so I'm a little. I would hate to cut out one of those meetings and then have folks say, well, I thought I had till the 3rd meeting, and I was going to wait and I was going to make a really insightful comment that was going to change the course of history, so I think as much as I think it might be overkill, public outreach is never overkill, I suppose. It may be an extremely robust process in light of the decision to be made. I think I'd be inclined just to leave it as is, but...
I would agree.
So leaving it as is means we would have a study session on the 5th, and we would we would not be hearing a study session or any recommendation. We would not agendize it for action on the 7th or the 21st.
I'm confused now. What went out on there was something that went out from the county manager, I think. It was on the thing.
The update, the city update.
The city update. Does anyone have that? It had dates in it already, I thought.
I might have put it. Hold on.
Yeah, so there was a city council electronic newsletter that you might have received. There's also the City of Good Living newsletter that goes out to every household. I don't believe it's that issue.
I don't think it's that one. Sorry, I thought I had the...
I have a copy right here, thanks to Laura.
I'd be happy to be wrong. I heard that, and I will...
I don't think it has a December 5th.
What does it say?
This card with me.
For the first...
Okay, well then maybe oh, do you have it? Yes, this is exactly what I was looking for.
Is that the newsletter?
Yeah, so it says, Planning Commission study session December 5th, Planning Commission public hearing, which is the decision, January 17th. So, thank you, that's super helpful. I think that then I would say that we maintain that schedule.
Yep. I mean, I agree. I don't think we necessarily are struggling for more information, but I think it's important that we stick with the schedule that was sent out.
Okay, so does staff have the guidance that they would like? Is there any other guidance that staff would like? So we're going to come back for another study session on December 5th, and then we're going to make a recommendation on the City Council on January... What was that date?
17th, is that?
17th.
Okay. All right. So, folks who are here, what this means to translate is December 5th, we're going to have a meeting just like this. Come back, don't come back, whatever you prefer. You can speak again. You don't have to speak again. You can write us an email. We read everything. And then on January 17th, we're going to make a recommendation to the City Council on lot splits. Then the next thing we're going to almost immediately start doing is looking at housing sizes, and that'll be next. And again, I mean, I know these meetings are long, and everybody has a life. We really do listen to you, and it matters. I mean, it really does matter, because we're not elected officials, the City Council is, but we are supposed to be responsive to our community. That's what we're trying to do, try and make decisions that are both responsive and, in our opinion, in the best interests of the community. Usually those things are the same, not always, but usually they are. Thank you for coming out. I think we have a little bit more business to do, but I think that concludes our discussion today on lot splits. So a couple more things before we go. We'll be done in a few minutes. Are there any reports on recent City Council actions?
Yes, staff would like to share with the commission. As you recall, at the last Planning Commission meeting, I believe it was, there was a presentation given to you by Economic Development Coordinator Martin Romo concerning commercial linkage fees. A presentation was given to the City Council, and they were supportive of the concept and have since directed staff to return with a formal recommendation in anticipation of adopting such commercial linkage fees. So I wanted to share that with the Planning Commission. Is there anything else from City Council? That's all I have for City Council.
Are there any Planning Commission comments or reports from us?
I just wanted to remind everybody I will not be seeing you until after the election.
Awesome or not
Depending
awesome?
on the election, maybe not after that either.
Or you'll be seeing me via electronic means.
Is there any correspondence that wasn't related to lot splits, and recognizing that correspondence is already part of the record?
That is correct. I believe the commission received 8 emails on the dais tonight, and staff will continue to collect those and provide and forward those to the commission throughout the life of this project.
And are there any planning staff comments, reports, and/or updates of current projects?
Our next meeting is scheduled for November the 7th, and we're still on target to present the commission with an overview of the downtown parking management strategies for your information and comment. Also on the agenda, as we've discussed here tonight, will be the variance request for a 12-foot tall perimeter wall along the Landmark Hotel project.
Thank you so much. If nobody has anything else, the meeting is adjourned. You know, I don't think it is actually. This is an assisted listening device. There was a gentleman I think who had.
Hi, I'm Dave Pucci, Deputy Fire Chief for the Redwood City Fire Department, serving the city of San Carlos. We're getting ready for Fire Prevention Week, which is October 9th through the 15th this year, and the theme this year is Don't Wait, Check the Date, and Install Your Smoke Detectors. The smoke detectors that you purchase nowadays are designed to last for 10 years, so when you buy them and install them, you have to check the manufacturing date on the bottom of the smoke detector. Go ahead and mark that clearly, and then all you have to do is check your functioning smoke detector once a week to make sure that it's sounding properly. And when 10 years comes up, then you just replace the whole thing. You no longer need to replace your batteries every year. The batteries are designed to last 10 years as well. In preparation for Fire Prevention Week, we have a Protect Your Home fair coming up on Laurel Avenue. It's on October 2nd at 10 a.m. Right next to the farmers market. And if you come out there, you'll be able to see us that day, and we'll be able to show you some fire apparatus, give you some additional fire prevention tips, and be able to meet your local firefighters as well as the sheriff's office and other public safety officials. So we hope to see you there. If you need further information, we do have longer videos on the website that you can look up, and we'll be able to go into more detail. Thank you.